We want to fix our childhood, and it is about healing like these old attachment wounds. People say, well, aren't you afraid people are going to fall in love with you?
Hello, it is me, Christine. I am here with a very special guest. She is the world-renowned Michelle Renee, so I'll let her...
World-renowned.
World-renowned in my world. So I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself.
I'm Michelle Renee. I am a surrogate partner and professional cuddler, which means that I do relational-based work for relational-based healing.
Just right off the bat, too, what is cuddle therapy?
That's a really important question. Mm-hmm. So cuddle therapy is like professional cuddling. Mm-hmm. We allow access to touch for clients that are sometimes undertouched, lonely, going through grief, and even more importantly, when they have trauma around touch or attachment wounds, sometimes that is a great space for them. Everybody needs a different healing modality, but professional cuddling is two-way touch. So not just like if you went to the massage therapist to get touch needs met, you might get to feel touched. But to touch another person is not something that you get in those spaces. So we have two-way touch is what we call it.
How did you even get started becoming like a cuddle therapist? Like what led you along this path?
The quickest story I can tell you of this, because it would eat the whole episode. I got divorced in 2014 as a stay-at-home mom of like a couple kids that I homeschooled with an accounting background. Wow. And I thought, I don't want to go work in an office. That sounds horrible. And I started working on my own sexuality and decided I wanted to go into hands-on sex education. And so I did some digging around and hung out in the sex ed world and couldn't quite figure out what I wanted to do. And professional cuddling came on the scene. Cuddlist.com launched at the end of 2015. And in their launch, they wanted to build up a list of practitioners, so they were offering free training. And I thought, who needs training in professional cuddling?
Wow.
But it was free, so I thought I'd check it out. And I thought, I'm a mom and I could cuddle. And all these years later, I'm still there, and I'm their director of training now. I'm going to be part owner of the business. Like, it's really changed my life as far as coming out of unhealthy relational dynamics as a child and in my first marriage. I say I've healed through my work because in that space I got to learn how to communicate, learn how to set and hold boundaries. I got to learn about my own bodily autonomy, something that I didn't really get from my parents. And so learning how to just have a better, healthy relationship with myself and other people really came through that work.
Another thing that you are is a certified surrogate partner. So just touching on that, what is that and what does it mean to be a surrogate partner?
Yeah, so surrogate partner therapy started back with Masters and Johnson, which were some sex researchers in like the 60s and 70s. And back in the day, it was really about helping primarily cis men with erectile issues, whether it be erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation. They would come to St. Louis, where Masters and Johnson worked, with their partner. Their wives and them would go in for like a week intensive where they would work with these doctors around sensate focus exercises, which is like how to get you better in your body, to be more present during sex. And that was really effective for helping with those modalities. But what happened when you had a single man show up, you didn't have a partner, they brought in what were the first surrogate partners. So a stand-in partner. So traditionally, it has been work that has worked around sexuality and sexual problems. I've taken the sex part out of the work, and so I'm still a surrogate partner, but I think of it as like a surrogate person, a surrogate mother in a way that I have a lot of mothering energy, so reparenting work, a surrogate nervous system to learn how to have more secure attachment, more regulated nervous system. Those are all things that happen in my office.
Just dating back all the way, even before you became a professional cuddle therapist and a surrogate partner, what was your first job? Do you remember what it was?
I mean, we're talking, you want to go back to like junior high?
Yeah, junior high.
Okay.
Bring it back.
I lived in West Michigan, which is very rural, so a lot of farms. I lived on a farm. My first job was as a corn detasseler, which meant that I walked through rows of corn and pulled the tassels off like the female, I think it was the female corn.
Wow.
So it probably covered me in like pesticides.
Oh my God.
I can only imagine how not like safe it was, but that was my first job. It was heavy labor in a way because you're out in the sun all day. It's very dirty. But as a kid, that paid really good money.
Right.
And so I thought I was, balling back then. I had all the money for the school clothes, all the things.
They're like, wow, Michelle.
I only did it one season.
That's all you needed was one season.
I would never put my kids
through that.
No. I mean, after that, I think I ended up at a pizza place, like making sandwiches and then waitressing.
I love
it's my
pizza
favorite
so
food,
much.
but we can talk about why. And I think it has to do with like a regular activity I did with my mother.
Oh.
I was in a class recently that brought that all together. That might be why it's my favorite food.
So this is something that I know is mentioned a lot on your website. But what is the Foundations of Human Connection and the Human Connection Lab? Just touching on what that is.
So I came up with the Human Connection Lab because I was working with a client, and this was back when I used to do sexual intimacy as part of my work. And I was really struggling with how I was going to mentally prepare for sexual intimacy with this client. The work is, we do it because we're willing, not necessarily because we're wanting. And I really was struggling with this client as far as we weren't connecting super well.
Oh, no.
And I was talking to one of my colleagues about how do you put yourself in the mental space to have intimacy like that with a client that you're just not feeling quite right with. And she assured me that she says, you call it lab time. You don't have to show up in your full erotic nature. It's like about being a teacher, right? And just changing the idea in my head that it was more of a lab space for us to experiment. It didn't have to look like the romance novels or, whatever the client thought it needed to look like, that I could explain it as lab time. And so that's where I decided to call the overall business, the Human Connection Lab. Foundations of Human Connection is another way to say what I do in a way that might land on people a little easier. Some people aren't going to connect with the idea of coming in for professional cuddling. It has its own kind of stigma around it. And in my work as a surrogate partner, we always have to have a therapist as part of our team. It's just part of why we to call it surrogate partner therapy, it needs to be in what we call the triadic model. But that's usually because we're diving into really deep issues for the client, and we want to make sure they have enough support. Now, what happens when somebody comes to me and they don't have a talk therapist and they're adamant about not getting a talk therapist? I don't want to turn them away. I think of it as harm reduction, and how can we still work together and maybe get them to the point where they can see the benefit of having a talk therapist. But it's the same thing as showing up for a cuddle session. I mean, what it really comes down to is I'm going to ask you, how do you want to connect? And a lot of times that's the problem people are trying to figure out. And we're going to get there, whether it's through cuddling or my toolbox of exercises or what have you. I show up the exact same way, no matter if you come in. If you came in through Cuddlist.com or you came in through the Human Connection Lab, you're getting the same Michelle. I just modify the language to make it more intriguing for people.
Something that you mentioned too is a little bit of the stigma around cuddle therapy. So what do you feel like are some of the misconceptions of what you do as a cuddle therapist?
I think the number one thing is that it's undercover sex work. And I want to say there are plenty of people in the cuddle industry that are doing both. And I think I'm pro sex work. I think everybody deserves to have access to pleasure. But for myself that doesn't work in that, I think that's a really common misconception that that's something that they can get out of my work.
Right.
I just work around that by being really clear in all of my paperwork. So
right, and your boundaries, setting those.
Yeah, I haven't had a client be confused about that in a long time. But as an industry, we do battle that a lot. Wow. I think the other thing that people say, well, aren't you afraid people are going to fall in love with you?
Oh my goodness, do you get that question a lot?
All the time. Because it's so relational based. I am forming a relationship with all of my clients. And here's the thing, I love them, right? And we get to talk about what does love mean, right? And I say, like, love heals. I've been healed through, like, just really unconditional love. And I want other people to have that experience. There are clients that have come in that have never even been able to say the words, I love you, to another person. I welcome that. I'm totally comfortable in that space. So when people say, like, aren't you afraid? No, that is where, like, we all need to feel deep connection to another person. I'm really good with my boundaries around that. Me loving you does not mean XYZ. Me loving you means that I care for you. Right. I want the best for you. And I use this as an example. If you came in and you said, Michelle, I really don't think this is the work for me. I love you enough to want you to have what's the best for you. If there is something else, I want to help you go there. Right? It's not about keeping you all to myself. Right? And that's what we get confused about, I think, in love, when we think about romantic love, or we think about familiar love, or, all these different kinds of love. I think they're all the same thing. I think it's about care.
That's such great advice, too, and kind of puts a clear understanding of that concern that people have of people falling in love with you. It's like, well, why not?
It's not scary.
It's not scary, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of having a therapist on our team, is that they can help you talk about those feelings. Not that they're not welcome to talk about in my space. I'm totally comfortable with that. But sometimes it's easier to talk to somebody else about what's going on for you. And if somebody comes in and they don't have a talk therapist, sometimes what happens is they get really overwhelmed by the feelings. And that's cool. It's maybe they're not ready for that, or it's not for them. But some people really stick around, and it is about healing, like, these old attachment wounds. We keep trying to we want to fix our childhood. And that's where I say, like, I have big mom energy. And so a lot of people don't realize they're coming in to work on their mother wounds. I mean, I didn't have a super nurturing mom.
It's funny because just by meeting with you and talking with you, I just would have never thought, because you're just you yourself are very nurturing.
Me now?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I joke, like, I wonder what my kids think to be like, I wasn't a super nurturing mom with them. I didn't see myself that way, at least. And I think I'm much more nurturing now. And I think, what is it like for them in their, like, young adulthood to have almost like a mom for hire?
Like you were saying, even before, the camera started rolling, but just how much growth within your own journey happens, and you can restart, and really redefine who it is that you are, and your own identity, and how you treat people. And growing up, did you have an idea of what you wanted to be? Was there anything where you're like, I want to be a ballerina, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be...
The first thing I wanted to be was an artist. And I had a great aunt that told me, you'll never make any money at that, Michelle. So I quit drawing and painting and things like that. And then I thought I was going to go into law.
Wow.
And I thought maybe like sports agent, something like that, because I was always really athletic. It's just funny because I have a sister that's a lawyer. I could have had a long list of things I wanted to be. And even when my marriage ended and I was this freshly minted 37-year-old with no career, the list of things that were on my radar was long, right? And so it was in my own work that I realized that, like, this was really the direction I wanted to go. Now, if I went back, like, now I would have loved to have been a talk therapist. I really love, like, I've been in therapy. Have you been in therapy?
I have been in therapy.
I love how people are open to talking about this. Sitting in therapy and sitting across from my therapist and crying and wishing they could hold me while I cry, right? I could do that. And that is, like, it's really lovely. Right. And I cry with my clients at times. And sometimes I cry for my clients because they're not even able to tap into that grief themselves. Like, I get to show up fully as myself, and I know that would be a limitation in talk therapy.
Just even thinking about grief and grief in its own way, like, there's so many ways that people do choose to grieve, and I feel like having that option to have your therapist come and hold you is, like, huge.
They can't. It's really against their code, right? It is just some therapists will hug you, and I know I've hugged my therapist a few times, right? But that is very different than literally being embraced,
right?
And just really holding someone, and it's like a long hug. Like, we can do a 90-minute hug.
Obviously, everybody has their own ways of coping, but I think personally, like that, like a warm embrace when you're going through a difficult time.
Yeah, in a place that is, like, welcoming to tears.
Yeah.
I'm not uncomfortable with that at all. And I've been in relationships that were not comfortable with that kind of emotion. And then there's people that they want to learn how to tap into that emotion. And we've been able to do that together in our space together. I had a person that wanted to find a place to fall apart, and they didn't think they'd be able to do it. And we scheduled, I think, a 2-hour session. And in that session, we read sad song lyrics together, like love songs, and we slow danced. And he cried like 3 times.
Oh,
like, it was beautiful. It was one of my favorite sessions.
given the sensitive nature of your clientele, you know, they may be coming to you, they may be grieving through something, they may have dealt with trauma. Are there usually steps that you take with each client or each person that comes to you?
All of my work runs kind of under the Cuddleist method, minus the code of conduct. So Cuddleist has a very specific code of conduct. If I need to take somebody outside of that code of conduct, we do that in an official way. But everything is kind of has the same kind of, it's always client-led. That helps with people that they can come in with really big traumas, or they could come in just because they're lonely. The whole breadth of my work can fall under that. We're going to keep it client-led, which means I don't offer my clients anything.
Got it.
You have to learn how to ask for what you want. And we can coach around that and figure that out together. But I'm never going to be like, oh my gosh, I would just love if you let me, I don't know, big spoon with you.
Right.
And you're like, she really wants this.
Right.
I feel bad if I say no. And then like later you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I can't trust Michelle because she asked me this thing and I didn't know how to say no. And now I've ruined any chance of us having a safer relationship between us.
Gotcha.
Right? So that is part of it. I treat everybody the same that way. When it comes to trauma, I don't need to know what your trauma is.
Gotcha.
You're welcome to talk to me about it. I have heard so much stuff. I am totally okay with that. I can handle it. People will say like, how do you go home and not take it home with you? I've got really good psychological boundaries.
That's good.
Right? Yeah. So, but you're welcome to talk about it, but you don't need to. And that's like, again, keeping it client-led.
That's very comforting to hear, especially if somebody who wants to be a client of yours or a future client of yours.
I have confidentiality.
Right.
Sometimes you'll hear me talk about clients. Like I have a couple podcast interviews with a client, but it's all with their consent.
Right.
I'm never going to talk about specifics without, it being okay with the person that I'm talking about.
What would you say is the most important lesson you've learned since doing your work as a cuddle therapist, as a surrogate partner?
Picking one.
I know.
This one popped in my head on the way over here, and I say it often. Making a choice is more important than what you choose.
Ooh. Wait, I need to hear that again. That one,
right?
So deep.
Making a choice is more important than what you choose.
Wow.
We need to be in choice. Right? We can always change our mind. We can do it different. Talking about my kids, right? I am parenting them differently now than when they were younger. Well, we would always do that. But I am much more accountable. I have a better capacity to hear them. Like these are all new choices that I'm making, right? I can apologize for how I was maybe an inattentive parent. All these things, right? We get to make new choices every day. Every minute of every day, we can make a different choice. And I think that is like something to remember and keep in the back of your head that you're not stuck.
Right. Wow.
It may take some steps.
Right.
To unstick the stuck.
Right.
But making a choice is more important than what you choose.
That opened my mind up.
Well, I can give you another one. You want a bonus?
I'll take another one. Yeah.
I can't trust your yes if I've never heard your no.
Ooh. That's a good one.
Right?
I can't trust your yes if I haven't heard your no.
So I welcome a no. With a client, if the first time they tell me no, like, actually, I don't want to do that, I changed my mind. Like the level of trust that they can advocate for themselves goes way, way up, right?
That's deep. That one's going to stick with me too.
Because so when I hear a no, I get to celebrate it. Because it makes for a better connection between me and the other person.
I love that perspective too, because I think that there's a lot of resistance when people hear no, you know, just in general. So welcoming it and embracing it and saying, I love to hear
the trust.
the trust and the truth and the honesty behind that too, by saying,
yeah, you're in your integrity.
Exactly.
When you're a yes person, your face.
Gets stuck. I mean, you get kind of stuck if you can't advocate for yourself too, then
you can't be close to anybody.
Exactly. If you can't say no, then what is the meaning of your yes then?
And also, for somebody to tell me no, that means that they feel safe enough to tell me no.
Right.
That I've welcomed that no.
Do you have any advice for your younger self? It could be any age. It could be the version of you that was going through the divorce. It could be the version of you that was growing up in Michigan. What advice would you give to yourself? Young Michelle.
It's going to be really hard, and it's going to be okay. Like, it's so weird. Like, I joke that it's a bad joke. I went through a lot of those big adult things in my 20s. My 20s are really hard. Like,
oh, wow. Yeah.
You know, I had a child with a chronic illness.
Oh, my goodness.
When I was in my early 20s, I was a mom that had to keep her child alive all the time with type 1 diabetes. And I lost my mom when I was 27 to cancer. I filed for bankruptcy later in my late 20s. Gosh, what else is... you know what I mean? You check those boxes. They make me really compassionate. And I say, like, yeah, it hurt losing my mother. And that hurt makes you appreciate things more. Right? So I think to my younger self is like, yeah, it's going to be really hard. And you're going to be okay. It's just going to make you appreciate everything so much more.
It's very interesting hearing everything that you've had to go throughout your life, all the ups, all the downs, and to see how you are and how you carry yourself today as a person. It's like, just by looking at you and just meeting at you, I would never known.
And that's been the beauty of this work.
Right.
Right? Is that I get to practice every day. My old therapist would say, you healed a lot faster because you got to practice. Every time a new client comes in, I have to be okay with the uncomfortable.
Right.
Right? I have to, that first client, every time a new client shows up, I'm a little anxious because I don't know how we're going to connect. And I know, Michelle, it's going to be okay. Right? Or if a client, back in the day, having clients that came in and did think it was about sex, it's hard to tell people no.
Right.
And I'm going to have to do this thing, and I'm going to have to advocate for myself, which bodily autonomy, again, I mentioned before, was not something that I think a lot of parents, they want their kids to be compliant. And then we expect them to turn into teenagers that are able to advocate for themselves, but we haven't built that muscle in them. Right. So I ended up in a first marriage with a lot of coercion around sex. It was easier to say yes than say no because I had to deal with a whiny husband right. So if I have a client comes in and they want something that I'm not a yes to, that's one of our agreements is I will never say yes to something that I'm not wholeheartedly a yes to, or you're not going to feel a connection between us. If it's not authentic yes,
right,
then it is a paid service, but it's still an authentic connection. So I have to honor that, or my clients they're not going to get what they really need out of the session. So being able to say the hard things, right? Those are things that I get to practice every day when people come in.
So what advice do you have for someone who wants to be in your profession, wants to be in your field as like a cuddle therapist? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, good news. Cuddleist has a really robust training, and you don't have to have a background in, like, let's say therapy or something. I don't have a 4-year college education. I have parts of little things. I was a math major at one time, and then I was an accounting major, and I went back to school for pre-nursing. Like, I've done a little bit of things, right? But we have a training program that is, I think, really robust. And we do get to talk about trauma and what do you do when people come into your office. And you get to look at, what are my boundaries like? What do I need to work on? How do I do this thing? How do I really hold a brave space for clients to kind of take some chances, right? And it might not feel like a big chance to come in and get a hug. But for a lot of people, it really is, right? This is a really vulnerable personal service. And so you can do it. Cuddleist.com has a really great training, and we love bringing in new people. And then you just have to have a heart. Cuddleist is taking our work to a different level. It is not Uber Eats.
Right.
Right. This is not a side gig. At first, I mean, it can be definitely a part-time career, but it's not something you pick up because you
just want something on the side.
some quick cash on the side, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to enjoy the work if that's where you come at it from. But but as a healing modality, it's amazing to get to do this work. It's so fulfilling. I wouldn't change anything. Like, I would go back to this work in a heartbeat.
Does every session look different?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, because every client is different. Every need is different. It always starts the same. It's kind of like my podcast. I always start my podcast the same, and it goes somewhere else. But like, really though, it is like we deal with what is happening right in the moment. You can say like, okay, before our session, why don't you think about some ways you might want to connect? What kind of cuddling do you like? Well, how do you want to feel? I want to feel held, or I want to hold someone else, or what have you, right? But ultimately, what I want to know is when you get in the room, what do you want right now? Because we change all the time.
Right.
You might have wanted something earlier in the day, or the day before, or the week before when you made the request. But I want to know right now, what do you want? And that's about going inside. Like, we got to kind of take a little inventory of ourselves. And that can be really scary for some people.
I feel like there's something so present about that too. Just saying, okay, what do you need right now? And not to make the comparison, I just thought of Uber Eats, but it's like you could want one food 1 second and then pizza. Right when you come, you know what? So
that's why I don't ask me the question, what do you want for dinner tonight, until it's dinner time.
Exactly. Who is your biggest inspiration? It could be related to your work or even just with life. Who would you say inspires you the most?
I've had some really amazing, powerful women in my life. I've been so blessed. I'm going to go back to a woman named Betty Dodson. You can look her up. She is no longer here with us. But when I was leaving my marriage, I found an article about her, and I consumed every ounce of media I could around her. At that time, she was 85 years old. She had the mouth of a sailor. She was teaching masturbation classes in her Manhattan apartment for like 35 years. And I got to go work with her that fall. And that's why I'm doing this work. She was the reason I wanted to do hands-on sex education, because she changed my life around my orgasm. She changed my life around my body image. She changed my life around just owning my power. And I say she walked me through my divorce before I ever actually met her in person, because she just was so inspiring.
And I'm sure she's also so proud of you too.
She has raised a little army of really powerful people, and she was part of second wave feminism, and it was amazing to get to know her and to know that I shared space with her. And there's not a time that she's not like sitting on my shoulder.
You're just gonna reach in here and pick one out and see what's inside.
If you won $1 million tomorrow, what is the first thing you'd buy? I would move to La Jolla, because I'm currently in Rancho Bernardo and I need to be closer to the water. I got married there at the Scripps Seaside Forum.
You're kidding.
Like right below Caroline's.
Yes, I know exactly.
And I got married there. I love, because I can go have breakfast at Caroline's and like just have romantic memories of our very small wedding there. It was probably, I pride myself in it was probably the cheapest wedding that's ever happened in La Jolla. Oh my God. And then it was still way past our budget. But it was beautiful, and I don't regret it.
Wow, that's a good answer. Okay, now I'm going to know what your
Panda Express is. Be willing to assert yourself in situations of great importance.
Well, that is the end of the Work Break podcast episode with Miss Michelle Renee. I am so grateful and very honored to even have you here. How can they get a hold of you? What's a good way for them to follow you on any social media platforms? What's a good way to get in touch?
Yeah, for the Human Connection Lab first is humanconnectionlab.com, but I'm on social media at Meet Michelle Renee.
Michelle Renee, and also you have a really cool podcast too.
Yeah, the Intimacy Lab.
The Intimacy Lab.
On all the
platforms. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad you reached out.
So grateful for you. Well, I'll talk to you soon, and I'll see you at the next episode. Bye-bye.